I'm Abigail, 27 years old, and I built a multi-million dollar financial technology company from scratch. But my success story began with the ultimate betrayal. My own mother stole my $45,000 college fund to help my sister buy a house, leaving me homeless at 18. I spent months sleeping in my car, showering at the gym, and working multiple jobs just to survive. 9 years later, I returned as a millionaire to face the family who abandoned me and finally turn the tables. Let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe to join my journey of survival success and sweet justice. I grew up in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Our two-story colonial house with blue shutters was modest but comfortable, sitting on a tree-lined street where kids rode bikes after school and neighbors knew each other by name. My father, James, was an accountant at a mid-sized firm, while my mother, Diana, worked part-time as a receptionist at a local dental office. My sister, Sophia, was 4 years older than me with the same dark hair as our mother, but none of her sharp edges, at least not when our father was watching. From my earliest memories, I understood the unspoken hierarchy in our household. Sophia was the golden child who could do no wrong, while I seemed to exist in her shadow, perpetually falling short of my mother's expectations. When Sophia brought home B grades, she received praise and shopping trips. When I brought home straight A's, my mother would glance at my report card with indifference and ask why I hadn't joined more extracurricular activities like my sister. "Colleges look for well-rounded students, Abigail," she would say dismissively. "Grades alone won't get you anywhere." The contrast in how we were treated wasn't subtle. Sophia got new clothes at the start of each school season, while I inherited her hand-me-downs. When Sophia wanted to take dance lessons, my mother immediately found room in the family budget. When I asked to join the science club that required a small fee for materials, I was told money was tight and I should find free activities instead. My father was different. James Fuller was a kind, thoughtful man who believed in fairness and planning for the future. He noticed the imbalance in how we were treated and tried in his quiet way to compensate. He would take me to the bookstore on Saturday mornings, just the two of us, allowing me to select whatever books interested me. During these outings, he would often talk to me about financial responsibility in ways I could understand. "Your education fund is growing nicely, Abby," he would tell me proudly when I was around 12. "Every month I put money aside for both you and your sister. By the time you're ready for college, you'll have options." These conversations were our special bond. While my mother and Sophia went shopping, my father taught me about compound interest investments and the importance of saving. I soaked up his knowledge like a sponge, fascinated by the power of making smart financial decisions. He opened a small savings account in my name when I turned 13, showing me how to track my deposits and watch my money grow. "You have a good head for numbers, just like your old man," he would say, his eyes crinkling with pride. "Someday you might even outdo me." My sister had no interest in these lessons. Sophia was beautiful and sociable, easily making friends and attracting attention wherever she went. She learned early that charm and tears could get her what she wanted from our mother, and she wielded both with practiced precision. When Sophia wanted a more expensive prom dress than the agreed budget, she simply cried to our mother about how all the other girls would have nicer dresses, and Diana immediately relented. My mother's credit card would appear, and the budget would be forgotten. "Your sister has social obligations," my mother would explain when I questioned the double standard. "You wouldn't understand Abigail." Despite the constant comparisons and lack of emotional support from my mother, I excelled academically. School became my refuge, a place where merit was rewarded and effort recognized. I maintained perfect grades, joined the debate team, and participated in science competitions. My teachers praised my analytical thinking and dedication, providing the validation that was scarce at home. My father attended every debate competition and science fair, sitting in the front row with his camera ready. He would beam with pride when I won awards, framing my certificates and displaying them prominently in his home office. My mother rarely attended these events, always finding excuses about work or having to help Sophia with something more important. Everything changed when I was 16. On a cold November evening, my father collapsed in our kitchen while preparing dinner. The paramedics arrived quickly, but it was too late. He had suffered a massive heart attack. The world as I knew it ended that day. I lost not only my father, but also my protector, my advocate, and the only person who seemed to see me for who I was. The funeral was a blur of black clothes and sympathetic murmurs. I remember standing beside my mother and sister feeling completely alone despite being surrounded by people. My mother maintained her composure, accepting condolences with dignified nods, while Sophia cried dramatically, receiving hugs and comfort from everyone around us. I stood silently, my grief too profound for public display. In the months that followed, our family dynamics shifted dramatically. Without my father's balancing presence, my mother's favoritism towards Sophia became even more pronounced. The house felt colder, conversations shorter, and tension thicker. My mother became more controlling, scrutinizing my every move and decision. Our financial situation changed as well. My father's life insurance provided some stability, but my mother frequently mentioned how we needed to be careful with money, now that we were down to one income. Despite these comments, she continued to indulge Sophia's wants, from a new laptop for college to weekend trips with friends. Throughout this difficult period, one thought kept me going: my college fund. I knew my father had been diligent about contributing to it monthly for years. I clung to the knowledge that even though he was gone, his foresight would help me build the future he had always encouraged me to pursue. I threw myself into my studies with renewed determination, aiming for scholarships to supplement the fund and honor his memory through academic excellence. Little did I know that the safety net my father had so carefully woven was about to be torn away by the very people who should have protected his legacy and his youngest daughter. My senior year of high school should have been filled with excitement about college acceptance letters and future possibilities. I had worked tirelessly to maintain a perfect GPA and secure admission to several prestigious universities, including my dream school, the University of Pennsylvania. With my father's college fund and the partial scholarships I'd earned attending Penn, seemed within reach despite the steep tuition. Winter had turned to spring, and I was 17, counting down the days until graduation. One evening, I came home from debate team practice to find my mother and Sophia sitting at our kitchen table, their heads close together, giggling over something on Sophia's phone. The scene was so rare, my mother looking genuinely happy, that I paused in the doorway before making my presence known. "Abigail," my mother said, noticing me hovering near the entrance, "your sister has wonderful news." Sophia, now 21, and in her third year of college, thrust her left hand toward me, wiggling her fingers to display an enormous diamond ring that caught the kitchen light. "Tyler proposed," she squealed. "We're getting married this summer." Tyler was Sophia's boyfriend of 8 months, the son of a local real estate developer. He was handsome, charming, and came from money, everything my mother admired. I forced a smile and offered congratulations, though something about the relationship had always seemed rushed to me. "Isn't it gorgeous?" my mother asked, taking Sophia's hand to admire the ring again. "3 carats. Tyler has excellent taste." What followed was weeks of wedding planning that consumed our household. My mother transformed from a grieving widow to an energetic mother of the bride, making calls to venues, florists, and caterers at all hours. The wedding binder on our kitchen counter grew thicker daily, filled with magazine cutouts, fabric swatches, and price quotes that made my eyes widen. "Mom," I ventured one evening as she reviewed a catering estimate, "this seems really expensive. Are you sure we can afford all this?" She dismissed my concern with a wave. "A wedding is a once-in-a-lifetime event, Abigail. We'll make it work." Meanwhile, I was finalizing my college plans, comparing financial aid packages, and calculating expenses for the fall semester. I would need to access my college funds soon to make the initial tuition deposit. I had never handled the account myself, my father had managed it. And after his death, I assumed my mother had taken over as trustee until I turned 18 in July. One afternoon, I needed my Social Security card for a scholarship application. My important documents were kept in my father's old filing cabinet, which remained in the corner of what was now my mother's home office. While searching through the neatly labeled folders, I came across one marked Children's Education Accounts. Curious about the exact amount available for my tuition, I opened the folder. Inside were statements for 2 separate accounts: Sophia Fuller Education Fund and Abigail Fuller Education Fund. I quickly noticed that while Sophia's account showed a zero balance with a note about a final withdrawal made 2 years earlier for her college tuition, my account statement from the previous month showed a balance of $45,822.16. However, what caught my attention was a more recent transaction record stapled to the statement. It showed a withdrawal of $45,000 dated just 2 weeks earlier. My heart began to race as I stared at the paper, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. There had to be a mistake. Perhaps the funds had been transferred to another account for my tuition payments. I took the documents and headed downstairs, finding my mother in the living room scrolling through wedding venues on her laptop. "Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady as I held up the papers. "I found these in Dad's filing cabinet. It shows almost all the money was taken out of my college fund. Do you know anything about this?" She looked up at me, and what I saw in her expression made my blood run cold. There was no surprise, no confusion, only a flash of annoyance quickly masked by practiced calm. "Sit down, Abigail," she said, closing her laptop. I remained standing. "What happened to my college fund, the one Dad set up for me?" She sighed as if I were making an unnecessary fuss. "Sophia and Tyler are buying a house. They needed help with the down payment." The room seemed to tilt around me. "You took my college money for Sophia's house down payment. They're starting a life together," my mother said defensively. "A marriage needs a proper foundation. They found a beautiful home in Linden Heights, but they were short on the down payment. The opportunity would have passed if they didn't act quickly." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "But that money was for my education. Dad saved it specifically for my college." "You can take out student loans like most kids do," she replied dismissively. "Sophia needs this now. You can always work through college or attend community college first." "That's not the point." My voice rose with disbelief and anger. "That money was meant for me. Dad wanted me to have it." "Your father would have wanted what's best for the family," she snapped. "Sophia and Tyler are family. That house is an investment in their future." "What about my future?" I demanded, tears welling in my eyes. "I've been accepted to Penn. I've worked so hard for this." My mother's expression hardened. "You're being selfish, Abigail. Sophia getting married and buying a home is more important than your fancy college dreams. The money is gone, and that's final." The argument escalated quickly. I shouted about betrayal and theft. My mother countered with accusations of selfishness and ingratitude. Words became weapons hurled across the living room with increasing venom. "Your father always coddled you," she spat, "always making you feel special. Well, welcome to the real world where you're not the center of attention." "Dad saved that money for my education." I screamed through tears. "You had no right. I had every right. I'm your mother, and I decide what happens in this family." When Sophia arrived during our argument, I expected, or at least hoped, that my sister might show some remorse or offer a compromise. Instead, she sided firmly with our mother. "It's just money, Abby," Sophia said, with the casual indifference of someone who had never had to worry about finances. "Tyler and I really need this house. It's perfect for starting our family. You wouldn't want your future nieces and nephews living in some cramped apartment, would you?" "So your unborn children deserve my education fund?" I asked incredulously. "Do you even hear yourself? Why are you being so dramatic?" Sophia rolled her eyes. "Just take out loans or get a job. It's not like Mom cut off your arm." That night, the confrontation reached its breaking point. My mother delivered an ultimatum: accept the situation or leave. "I won't have this ingratitude and disrespect under my roof," she declared. "Either you accept that the decision is made and stop this tantrum, or you can find somewhere else to live." She probably thought it was an empty threat. I was 17, still in high school with graduation only weeks away. Where would I go? But in that moment, looking at the cold determination in her eyes and the smug satisfaction in Sophia's, something broke inside me. And something else. Something harder took its place. "Fine," I said quietly. "I'll leave." The shock on their faces might have been satisfying under different circumstances. They didn't believe me. But the next day after school, I began packing my belongings. Clothes, books, my laptop, and a few precious photos of my father went into suitcases and boxes. I worked methodically, tears streaming down my face as I prepared to leave the only home I'd ever known. My mother watched from the doorway, her arms crossed. "This is ridiculous, Abigail. Where will you even go?" I didn't answer. I didn't know. On the night before my high school graduation, I loaded my old Honda Civic, a 16th birthday gift from my father, with everything I could fit. My mother made one last attempt to make me conform. "You're throwing away your family over money," she said, blocking my path to the front door. "Is that really what your father would have wanted?" I looked at her directly. "Dad wanted me to go to college. He saved for years to make that happen. You stole that from me and gave it to Sophia, who already had her education paid for. Don't you dare tell me what he would have wanted." I pushed past her and walked to my car. As I pulled out of the driveway, I caught a glimpse of Sophia watching from her bedroom window, her expression unreadable. The next day, I sat alone during my high school graduation ceremony. When they called my name as valedictorian, the applause felt hollow. I scanned the audience out of habit, still half expecting to see my father's proud face. Instead, I found empty seats where my family should have been. Neither my mother nor Sophia attended. That evening, I parked my car in a Walmart parking lot, reclined the driver's seat as far as it would go, and tried to sleep as reality sank in. I was 18, homeless, and completely on my own. That first night in my car was surreal. I remember staring at the Walmart storefront through my windshield, watching people push shopping carts to their vehicles, returning to homes and families, while I huddled under a thin blanket in the reclined driver's seat of my Honda Civic. The overhead parking lot lights cast an artificial glow that made sleep nearly impossible. Every sound, car doors slamming, shopping carts rattling, occasional voices passing by, startled me awake. I kept the doors locked and my phone closed, though I had no one to call for help. Morning came after what felt like an eternity. I drove to a nearby gas station bathroom to wash my face and brush my teeth, avoiding eye contact with other customers. My reflection in the spotted mirror showed a pale, exhausted version of myself that I barely recognized. I straightened my clothes, tied back my unwashed hair, and tried to look like someone who hadn't just spent the night in a car. That day, I established a survival routine that would carry me through the coming months. I purchased a monthly membership at a 24-hour fitness center for $20, which gave me access to showers and bathrooms. The local library became my daytime sanctuary, offering free Wi-Fi, air conditioning, and a place to apply for jobs online without looking homeless. I found free meal programs at community centers and learned which fast food restaurants offered the most filling options for the least money. Within a week, I secured a job as a barista at a local cafe called Morning Brew. The pay was minimum wage plus tips, but most importantly, it offered flexible hours and free meals during shifts. The owner, Sandra, was a warm woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She noticed my situation faster than I expected. "You look exhausted, honey," she said during my third shift. "Everything okay at home?" I tried to deflect, but something about her genuine concern broke through my defenses. Before I knew it, I was telling her everything: the stolen college fund, being kicked out, sleeping in my car. I expected pity or awkwardness, but Sandra's reaction surprised me. "My brother threw me out when I was 16, she said matter-of-factly. "Lived in my car for 6 months before I got on my feet." "It's tough, but you're tougher." She squeezed my shoulder. "Take home leftover pastries at closing, and use the staff room to nap on your breaks if you need it." Sandra's small kindnesses saved me in ways I couldn't fully appreciate at the time. She adjusted my schedule to give me morning shifts, allowing me to search for a second job in the evenings. With her reference, I secured a position at a bookstore 3 evenings a week, which meant I now had two sources of income and fewer hours to spend alone in my car. Still, living in a vehicle took its toll. Summer heat made the car unbearable during the day. I developed back pain from sleeping in the cramped space, and despite my gym membership, maintaining hygiene was a constant challenge. I caught a respiratory infection that lingered for weeks because I couldn't afford to see a doctor, and had no health insurance after being removed from my mother's plan. The hardest part wasn't the physical discomfort but the isolation. I watched customers at the cafe meet friends for coffee, saw families browsing books together at the store, and felt the absence of my own support system acutely. I had deferred my acceptance to the University of Pennsylvania, explaining my situation to a sympathetic admissions counselor who promised to hold my spot for the following year if I could figure out my finances. But that goal seemed increasingly distant as I focused on day-to-day survival. After 3 months of living in my car, an opportunity arose through an unexpected source. Sandra's cousin was renting a room in her house on the other side of town. The room was small, and the house was shared with 3 other tenants, but the rent was just $400 monthly, utilities included. "It's not fancy," Sandra warned, "but it's clean and safe. Tina's picky about who she rents to, but I vouched for you." Moving from my car to a real room felt like unimaginable luxury. Having a door to close, a real bed to sleep in, and consistent access to a kitchen and bathroom restored some sense of dignity I hadn't realized I'd lost. My new roommates were all working adults in their 20s and 30s, a nurse's aide, a retail manager, and a culinary student who respected privacy and kept to themselves. For the first time in months, I slept through the night. With stable housing secured, I focused on my longer-term goals. I enrolled in evening classes at the community college, taking basic requirements that could transfer to a 4-year program eventually. Between my cafe shifts, bookstore hours, and classes, I operated on minimal sleep and maximum determination. I opened a small investment account with $500 saved from my tips, remembering my father's lessons about making money work for you. It was a tiny beginning, but it represented hope, something I'd been short on since his death. During this period, I discovered free online resources for learning coding and digital marketing. The library became my university as I absorbed tutorials, completed free certifications, and built small websites for practice. I was particularly drawn to financial technology, the intersection of my interest in finance inherited from my father, and the digital skills I was teaching myself. Holidays were especially difficult during this time. Thanksgiving came with invitations from both Sandra and my roommate Tina to join their family gatherings, which I accepted gratefully. But Christmas brought painful memories of my father and our traditions. I worked a double shift at the cafe to avoid sitting alone in my room, telling myself it was for the extra holiday pay, rather than admitting how much I dreaded the solitude. On Christmas evening, Sandra stopped by the cafe with a small wrapped package, a refurbished laptop she'd bought from her nephew Marcus, who owned a computer repair business. "You can't keep using the library computers for your classes," she said firmly, waving away my protests. "Consider it an investment in your future. Besides, Marcus gave me a good deal." That laptop changed everything. With my own device, I could work from my room, take online courses more efficiently, and build a freelance profile offering basic web design services. Sandra's seemingly simple gift was actually a gateway to opportunity. A few weeks later, Sandra introduced me to Marcus himself when he came to fix the cafe's point-of-sale system. Marcus was 30 with an easy smile and a passion for technology that matched my own. He listened intently as I described an idea that had been forming in my mind, a financial literacy app specifically designed for young adults who, like me, found themselves suddenly navigating financial independence without preparation. "That actually sounds really useful," he said, looking genuinely impressed. "I know programming, but I'm terrible with financial stuff. Wish I'd had something like that when I was starting out." What began as a casual conversation evolved into regular brainstorming sessions. Marcus had technical expertise but had never developed a complete app before. I had the financial knowledge from my father and the personal experience of extreme financial hardship. Together, we began sketching out what would eventually become my ticket out of poverty. Our partnership started as an after-hours project, something we worked on when we weren't at our regular jobs. Marcus taught me coding basics while I outlined the educational content and user experience. We were an unlikely team, the homeless girl turned barista and the self-taught computer repair guy, but we shared a vision that kept us motivated through exhaustion and setbacks. For the first time since my father died, I felt a sense of purpose beyond mere survival. I was building something that could potentially help others avoid the financial vulnerability I had experienced. The irony wasn't lost on me. My mother's betrayal and the theft of my college fund had led me to create a tool for financial empowerment. As our prototype took shape, I began to see a path forward that wasn't just about reclaiming what I had lost, but creating something entirely new, something my father would have been proud of. With my basic needs met and a growing sense of purpose, I threw myself completely into developing what we initially called First Fund, an app designed to teach young adults the financial literacy basics my father had taught me. Marcus and I worked on the prototype whenever we could, meeting at the cafe after hours, or at the small desk in my rented room. Our concept was simple, but targeted an interactive platform that would make financial concepts accessible to people my age through real-life scenarios, simple explanations, and practical tools like budget templates and savings calculators. We focused particularly on college students and recent high school graduates, people facing financial independence for the first time. Most finance apps are made by bankers for people who already understand money, I explained to Marcus during one of our sessions. We need something that starts with the basics but doesn't talk down to users. While Marcus handled the technical architecture, I created content drawing from my father's teachings and my own hard-won wisdom from months of extreme budgeting. Each feature was designed to address a specific challenge I had faced: understanding credit-building emergency savings, finding legitimate financial aid, and avoiding predatory lending. After 6 months of development alongside our regular jobs, we had a working prototype. The app was basic but functional, allowing users to track expenses, set savings goals, and access educational modules. The next challenge was finding users to test it. I approached the community college where I was taking evening classes and secured permission to present our app to the student government. 20 students volunteered to be beta testers, providing feedback that helped us refine the user experience. Their enthusiastic response convinced us we were onto something with real potential. But turning potential into a viable business required capital, something neither Marcus nor I had. We needed funding for server costs, professional design services, and marketing if we wanted to reach beyond our small test group. Traditional bank loans seemed impossible given my non-existent credit history and lack of collateral. We need to find someone who believes in this as much as we do, I said to Marcus after calculating the minimum investment needed. Sandra, who had watched our project develop with growing interest, offered a solution I hadn't considered. Apply for a small business loan, she suggested. I'll co-sign if you need it. My credit's good, and I know a potential winner when I see one. With Sandra's backing, we secured a $15,000 loan, a modest amount in the world of tech startups, but enough to properly launch our app. We used the funds to hire a professional designer, to polish the interface, upgrade our server capacity, and create a simple marketing campaign targeting college campuses. The official launch came almost exactly 1 year after I had found myself homeless. We celebrated in the Morning Brew Cafe after closing, the three of us, Sandra, Marcus, and I, toasting with coffee instead of champagne. To First Fund, Sandra said, raising her mug, and to Abigail Fuller, the girl who turned disaster into opportunity. We had modest expectations for our initial user numbers, hoping for perhaps a few hundred downloads in the first month. What happened instead was beyond anything we had imagined. A popular finance blogger discovered our app and featured it in a post about resources for college students. That single mention led to thousands of downloads within days. Users began sharing their experiences on social media, particularly praising the jargon-free explanations and relatable scenarios. Local news picked up the story, focusing on the human interest angle. Homeless teen creates financial literacy app. I was reluctant to discuss my personal circumstances, but recognized that my experience lent credibility to our product. During one interview, I briefly mentioned sleeping in my car after losing my college fund, and the story went viral. Within weeks, First Fund had over 50,000 users and was growing daily. We scrambled to manage the unexpected demand, upgrading servers and addressing user feedback. Our small team worked around the clock, with Marcus handling technical issues, while I responded to media inquiries and user questions. Among those who noticed our sudden success was Victoria Wright, an angel investor known for supporting educational technology ventures. She requested a meeting to discuss potential funding for expansion. The meeting took place at Victoria's downtown office, a sleek space that made me acutely aware of my secondhand clothes and discount store briefcase. But when I began presenting our vision for First Fund, my insecurities faded. This was something I knew intimately, something I believed in completely. What sets you apart, Victoria said after my presentation, is authenticity. You've lived the problem you're solving. That shows in every aspect of your product. Victoria offered $500,000 in exchange for a 20% stake in the company, a deal that would allow us to hire developers, expand our content, and market the app nationally. It was more money than I could comprehend, coming just 18 months after I'd been counting pennies for gas. With Victoria's investment, First Fund transformed from a passion project into a legitimate business. I left my cafe and bookstore jobs to focus on the company full-time. Marcus joined as Chief Technology Officer, and we hired 3 additional developers and a marketing specialist. We moved into a small office space, nothing fancy but a huge step up from working at cafe tables and in my bedroom. As CEO of a growing startup at just 20 years old, I faced a steep learning curve. Victoria connected me with mentors who helped navigate the unfamiliar terrain of business strategy, team management, and investment rounds. I absorbed every lesson, often working 16-hour days to compensate for my lack of formal business education. The app continued to grow, evolving from basic financial education into a more comprehensive platform with personalized financial planning tools. We added features for student loan management, first-time apartment budgeting, and entry-level investment guidance. Each new element reflected challenges I had personally faced or that our users reported struggling with. By our 3rd year, First Fund had reached 1 million users and secured an additional 3 million in venture capital funding. Our team expanded to 50 employees working from a proper office in downtown Harrisburg. The company valuation crossed $20 million, a number that seemed surreal to someone who had once carefully rationed bathroom tissue from public restrooms. Personal success followed professional growth. At 25, I purchased my first home, a modest 3-bedroom house not far from where I'd grown up. The day I signed the mortgage papers, I thought of my father and how proud he would have been. I had not only survived, but thrived, building something meaningful from the ashes of betrayal. Throughout this period of rapid growth, I maintained minimal contact with my family. My mother had called once when the first news articles appeared about First Fund, leaving a voicemail that made no mention of our estrangement but suggested we catch up soon. I didn't return the call. Sophia had sent a friend request on social media, which I ignored. The company continued to gain attention with features in business magazines and invitations for me to speak at financial literacy conferences. One article in Business Insider profiled me as one of the top 30 under 30 entrepreneurs in financial technology, complete with a photo of me in our office. It was this article, apparently, that finally prompted more direct contact from my past. 9 years after being forced from my childhood home, with no communication beyond those few ignored attempts, I received an email from Sophia. The subject line read simply, "Please read, it's about Mom." The email from Sophia arrived on a Tuesday afternoon as I was reviewing quarterly projections with our finance team. I nearly deleted it without reading, assuming it was another half-hearted attempt to reconnect now that I had become successful. Something stopped me. Perhaps curiosity, perhaps the mention of our mother in the subject line. I waited until evening to open it, sitting alone in my home office with a glass of wine for fortification. The message was surprisingly brief. "Abby, I know you have every reason to ignore this, but Mom is sick. Breast cancer stage 3. The treatment is expensive and we're struggling financially since her insurance doesn't cover everything. I'm not asking for money, though we do need help. I'm asking if you'd consider talking to us. Mom asks about you often. We've both made terrible mistakes. I'm sorry for my part in what happened. Please respond, even if it's to tell me to leave you alone for good. Sophia." My immediate reaction was skepticism. The timing seemed convenient, reaching out when they needed financial assistance, rather than years earlier to make amends. Part of me wanted to delete the email and continue my life without the complications of family, who had proven themselves untrustworthy. But another part, a part that sounded like my father whispered that I should at least verify the claims before making a decision. The next day, I called Dr. Lisa Chen, the therapist I'd been seeing since First Fund's success had given me the means to afford proper health care. We had worked through many of my issues surrounding abandonment and family trauma over the years. "I'm not telling you what to do," Dr. Chen said after I explained the situation. "But I think you need to determine what response would bring you peace, regardless of what they deserve." After careful consideration, I decided to investigate before responding. I hired a private investigator to discreetly verify Sophia's claims about our mother's health and their financial situation. It felt cold and calculated, but I couldn't risk being manipulated again. The investigator's report arrived a week later, confirming key elements of Sophia's email. Diana Fuller had indeed been diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer 6 months earlier and was undergoing chemotherapy. Medical bills had accumulated despite her insurance coverage. More surprisingly, Sophia was divorced from Tyler after just 5 years of marriage. The house they had purchased with my college fund had been foreclosed on 3 years ago, following Tyler's failed business venture and subsequent bankruptcy. Mother and daughter now shared a small 2-bedroom apartment in a modest part of town. Sophia worked as an administrative assistant at an insurance company, while our mother had been forced to stop working due to her treatment. They were, as Sophia had indicated, in genuine financial distress. This information left me with a difficult decision. I had the means to help them easily. The cost of cancer treatment wouldn't make a dent in my finances. But money had never been the real issue between us. The theft of my college fund had been a betrayal of trust and family bonds. The question wasn't whether I could afford to help, but whether I was willing to reopen that wound. After another session with Dr. Chen and several days of internal debate, I made my decision. I would meet with them face to face for the first time in 9 years, not immediately offering financial assistance, but not refusing it either. I wanted to see them to understand if there was genuine remorse before deciding how to proceed. I replied to Sophia's email with a brief message. "I'll be at Mom's apartment this Saturday at 2 p.m. We can talk then." The days leading up to the meeting were filled with anxiety. I rehearsed what I would say, trying to find the balance between standing my ground and showing compassion. I selected my outfit carefully, professional but not flashy, projecting confidence, without flaunting success. This wasn't about revenge or showing off. It was about closure. When Saturday arrived, I drove to the address from the investigator's report. The apartment complex was clean, but dated, with faded siding and small balconies cluttered with bicycles and potted plants. I sat in my car for several minutes, gathering courage before approaching Building C and climbing the exterior stairs to apartment 204. Sophia answered my knock almost immediately, as if she'd been waiting by the door. 9 years had changed her more than I expected. The confident, beautiful sister I remembered had been replaced by a thinner, tired-looking woman with premature lines around her eyes and mouth. Her hair was shorter, her clothes simple and worn. "Abby," she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. "You came." I nodded stiffly, not ready for emotional exchanges in the hallway. "Is Mom here?" "Yes, she's in the living room. She's having a good day today." Sophia stepped back to let me enter. The apartment was small and sparsely furnished, but tidy. Family photos decorated the walls, including several of me from high school pictures I hadn't known existed. I paused briefly at one showing me at a debate competition, wondering who had taken it since neither my mother nor sister had attended my events. My mother sat in a recliner by the window. Cancer and chemotherapy had ravaged her once commanding presence. Her hair was gone, replaced by a floral headscarf. Her face was gaunt, her body seemingly shrunken inside a sweater that looked 2 sizes too large. When she saw me, her hand flew to her mouth. "Abigail," she said, her voice raspy but strong, "you look so much like your father." It wasn't what I expected her to say, and it temporarily derailed my carefully planned opening. I stood awkwardly in the center of the living room, suddenly unsure how to proceed. "Please sit down." Sophia gestured to the sofa across from our mother. "Can I get you something to drink?" "Water, coffee?" "Water is fine," I said, taking the offered seat. I set my purse beside me and folded my hands in my lap. studying the woman who had once been the center of my world, then the architect of my greatest hardship. Sophia brought water for all of us and sat on the arm of our mother's recliner, a united front. The tension in the room was palpable as we sipped our drinks in uncomfortable silence. Finally, my mother spoke. "I assume you know about my diagnosis." "Yes, I'm sorry you're ill." The words came out more formally than I intended. "Thank you for coming," she continued. "I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't," I admitted. "We've seen the articles about your company," Sophia interjected. "The app sounds amazing. Dad would have been so proud." The mention of our father from Sophia's lips sparked a flash of anger. "Don't," I said sharply. "Don't talk about what Dad would have thought. You gave up that right when you took the money he saved for my education." The room fell silent again. My mother looked down at her thin hands, while Sophia bit her lip, blinking back tears. "You're right," my mother said eventually. "We have no right to claim your father's pride, but we are proud of you, Abigail. What you've accomplished is remarkable, especially considering you left me homeless at 18. I finished for her. "Yes, I'd say I've done well despite that." They seemed shocked by my directness. Perhaps they had expected time to have softened my resentment or success, to have erased the memory of those desperate months. "We know we can't change what happened," Sophia said quietly. "But we're truly sorry, Abby. Both of us. What we did was unforgivable." "Yet here I am being asked to forgive," I observed. "Or at least to pay for Mom's treatment. That is why you contacted me, isn't it?" My mother flinched at the bluntness of my words. "We reached out because I'm sick and didn't want to die without seeing you again. The money? Yes, we need help. My insurance has a high deductible and the copays for treatments are substantial. But that's not the only reason." "What happened to the house?" I asked, though I already knew the answer from my investigator's report. I wanted to hear their version. Sophia looked pained. "Tyler made some bad investments. We lost everything, including the house, about 4 years ago. The divorce was finalized last year. So the $45,000 that was meant for my education, the money that would have changed the entire course of my life, was ultimately wasted on a house you couldn't keep." They had no defense for this and offered none. The irony hung in the air between us, undeniable and bitter. "We've struggled since then," my mother admitted. "I was working 2 jobs before the diagnosis. Sophia has been covering most of our expenses since I had to stop working, but with the medical bills..." I leaned forward, meeting my mother's eyes directly. "I need to understand something. Do you actually regret what you did to me? Not because it didn't work out for Sophia, not because you need my help now, but because it was wrong to steal from your own daughter and throw her out." My mother looked away first. "I was wrong," she said softly. "I convinced myself I was doing what was best for the family, but I was favoring Sophia as I always had. I didn't think about what would happen to you. Or maybe I didn't want to think about it. I told myself you were smart and resourceful and would be fine. I lived in my car for 3 months. I said, my voice steady despite the emotion rising in my throat. I got sick because I couldn't afford a doctor. I worked 3 jobs while taking classes. I was alone during every holiday, every birthday. I was anything but fine." Tears slipped down my mother's hollow cheeks. Sophia was openly crying now, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "We know," Sophia whispered. "We've read every article about you. When that first interview mentioned you being homeless, I threw up. I actually threw up from shame when I realized what we'd done." I had imagined this confrontation countless times over the years, picturing myself cold and unmoved by their regret. But sitting there facing the human cost of 9 years, my mother's illness, Sophia's failed marriage, their genuine distress, I found the anger I had nurtured for so long beginning to transform into something more complex. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. We had all lost something precious. They had lost their comfortable lives and their relationship with me. I had lost my family and my faith in unconditional love. None of us were the same people who had parted ways 9 years earlier. After a moment of reflection, I spoke again. I didn't come here today to torment you with the past, but I needed you both to hear the reality of what your decisions did to me before we discuss anything else. They nodded subdued and seemingly prepared for whatever judgment I might render. What came next would determine not just the course of my mother's treatment, but the possibility of healing wounds far older than her cancer diagnosis. The balance of power had shifted dramatically since our last encounter. Now I was the one who would decide what happened next, and whether there was any path forward for what remained of our family. The air in the small apartment felt heavy with decades of complicated emotions: love and betrayal, anger, and regret, all compressed into the space between us. For several minutes, no one spoke. I allowed the weight of my words to settle, watching as my mother dabbed at her tears with the tissue Sophia had handed her. "I want to be very clear about something," I finally said, my voice measured and calm. "I didn't build my company and my life to prove anything to either of you. I did it for myself, and because I had no other choice. But now that I'm here, I need you both to understand exactly what happened after I left." I began recounting my experience chronologically, sparing no details. I described the discomfort and fear of those first nights in my car, the humiliation of sneaking into public restrooms to wash up before work, the constant anxiety about where I would park safely each night. I explained how I rationed food to stretch my minimum wage paycheck, sometimes going hungry to afford gas for my car, my only shelter. I developed bronchitis that winter, but couldn't afford antibiotics, I continued. I worked cafe shifts with a fever because missing a day meant not eating. Sandra, my boss, who eventually became my mentor, finally noticed how sick I was and bought me medication herself. My mother's face crumpled with each new detail, while Sophia stared at the floor, unable to meet my eyes. "The worst part wasn't the physical hardship," I told them. "It was knowing that my own family had chosen this for me, that my mother and sister had decided I was disposable." "You weren't disposable," my mother whispered. "I was wrong, so terribly wrong." I acknowledged her words with a nod, but continued my account, describing how I had built myself back up from nothing. The small room I eventually rented, the community college classes, teaching myself coding late into the night after exhausting work shifts. I explained how the idea for First Fund had emerged directly from my experience of financial abandonment. "Every feature in that app exists because of what happened to me," I said. "The emergency housing resource section. That's because I had to figure out shelter options alone at 18, the scholarship database. Because I had to find new ways to pay for education after my fund was stolen. Even the budgeting tools are based on how I managed to survive on minimum wage while saving for classes." When I finished speaking, I removed a manila folder from my purse and placed it on the coffee table between us. "This contains a timeline I've compiled," I explained. "News articles about First Fund, my college transcripts showing when I finally completed my degree through night classes, financial records from those early years. I want you to read through it later to fully understand what your actions caused." Sophia reached for the folder with trembling hands. "We will," she promised. My mother had remained silent during much of my narrative, but now she straightened in her chair, gathering what dignity she could. "Abigail," she said, her voice stronger than before, "I know we have no right to ask anything of you, but I am asking, not demanding, not expecting, just asking if there's any possibility you might help with my treatment costs. If the answer is no, we understand. What we did was unforgivable." I had anticipated this question and prepared my response carefully. "I'm not going to give you an immediate yes or no," I replied. "I have conditions that need to be met first." Their expressions showed a mixture of surprise and cautious hope. "What conditions?" Sophia asked. I leaned forward, maintaining steady eye contact with both of them. "First, Mom needs to write a complete acknowledgement of what she did taking my college fund without permission, kicking me out, and the favoritism that led to those decisions. A full accounting in her own words, not a hasty apology." My mother nodded slowly. "I can do that." "Second," I continued, turning to my sister, "Sophia will volunteer at a youth homeless shelter for 6 months, minimum of 8 hours weekly. You need to understand firsthand what you contributed to. Sophia swallowed hard but agreed. I will. I should. Third, if I pay for the medical treatments, we all attend family counseling together, not to force reconciliation, but to address the patterns that led us here and establish healthier boundaries going forward. They exchanged glances, seemingly surprised by the constructive rather than punitive nature of my conditions. And finally, I need honesty from both of you starting now and continuing always. No more manipulation, no more lies, no more pretending the past didn't happen. We accept all your conditions, my mother said without hesitation. They're more than fair. More than we deserve, Sophia added quietly. I reached back into my purse and withdrew a document I had prepared with my company's legal team. This outlines everything I've just said, plus the financial arrangement for the medical expenses. I'll cover all costs related to the cancer treatment not covered by insurance, but it will be handled through a medical trust I'll establish, not by giving you money directly. The unspoken message was clear. I still didn't trust them with cash given our history. Neither of them objected to this arrangement. There's a pen in the folder, I said, sliding the document toward them. If you agree to these terms, sign now and I'll have the trust established by Monday. My mother read through the agreement carefully before signing her name with a shaky hand. Sophia followed, then pushed the paper back across the table to me. Thank you, Abigail, my mother said softly. Not just for the help, but for giving us a chance we don't deserve. I put the signed agreement back in my purse and stood signaling the end of our meeting. This isn't forgiveness, I clarified. Not yet. It's an opportunity to build something new from the ruins of what we had. Whether that happens depends on all of us. As I prepared to leave, Sophia walked me to the door while our mother remained in her chair, looking exhausted from the emotional encounter. The app really is brilliant, Sophia said quietly. I've downloaded it. I wish I'd had it years ago. That's the point, I replied, to help people avoid what happened to me. At the doorway, Sophia hesitated, then asked, Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive us truly? I considered the question seriously. I don't know, but I'm willing to find out where this path leads. As I drove away from their apartment, I felt neither the triumph of revenge nor the warmth of reconciliation. Instead, I experienced something unexpected. A lightness, as if setting down a heavy burden I'd carried for 9 years. I hadn't forgiven them, but I had reclaimed the power to define our relationship on my terms. The money that had once divided us, my stolen college fund, was now inconsequential in the face of my success. What mattered now was whether genuine healing could emerge from the wreckage of our family. I had established the framework. Time would reveal if anything worth salvaging remained. The months following our confrontation brought changes none of us could have fully anticipated. The medical trust was established efficiently, ensuring my mother received the treatment she needed without financial strain. Her oncologist reported cautiously optimistic progress, with the tumors responding well to an aggressive chemotherapy regimen. True to her word, Sophia began volunteering at Hope House, a shelter for homeless youth in downtown Harrisburg. Initially, she approached the commitment as an obligation, the price for my assistance with our mother's medical bills. But something unexpected happened as she spent time with young people who had experienced circumstances similar to what I had endured. They remind me of you, she admitted during our first family counseling session 6 weeks after our initial reunion. Smart, determined, dealt a terrible hand but still trying. I keep thinking that could have been you if Sandra hadn't helped. The counseling sessions were challenging from the start. Dr. Marquez, a family therapist specializing in estrangement and reconciliation, created a structured environment where difficult truths could be expressed without degenerating into accusation and defense. During our third session, my mother presented the written acknowledgement I had required 12 handwritten pages, detailing her favoritism toward Sophia throughout our childhood, her resentment of my close relationship with my father, and her deliberate decision to take my college fund, despite knowing it would devastate me. I convinced myself you were stronger than Sophia, she read aloud, her voice trembling. that you could handle disappointment while she couldn't. But the truth was simpler and uglier. I prioritized her happiness over your basic needs. When James died, I lost the one person who checked my worst instincts. Without him, I became the mother I'd always feared I might be. Hearing this confession, this admission of conscious choice rather than momentary weakness, was both vindicating and painful. For years, I had wondered if I had somehow misunderstood or exaggerated the situation. Her words confirmed that my perceptions had been accurate all along. As the counseling continued, deeper patterns emerged. My mother revealed that her own mother had played favorites among siblings, creating a template for maternal behavior that she had unconsciously replicated. Sophia acknowledged how she had manipulated the dynamic playing on our mother's favoritism to get what she wanted without consideration for the cost to me. While these insights didn't excuse their actions, they helped me understand the generational dysfunction that had shaped our family. More importantly, I began to see genuine efforts toward change. Sophia's volunteer work evolved from obligation to commitment as she developed mentoring relationships with several teens at the shelter. My mother, facing her mortality through cancer, demonstrated a humility I had never witnessed before. Parallel to these family developments, I continued building First Fund into something larger than I had initially envisioned. Inspired by my reconnection with my family and the issues it highlighted, I established a nonprofit foundation alongside the commercial app. The James Fuller Education Security Foundation, named for my father, provided emergency housing and educational support for students who had been financially abandoned by their families. Dad always believed education was the path to security, I explained during a board meeting establishing the foundation. He never got to see me graduate college, but he'd be proud that his name is helping others complete their education, despite family obstacles. We launched with a $5 million endowment from First Fund's profits, structured to provide housing stipends, emergency funds, and educational grants to verified cases of students in situations similar to what I had experienced. The foundation partnered with community colleges and state universities to identify students at risk of homelessness due to family estrangement or financial abandonment. The public response was overwhelming. Media coverage of the foundation led to a feature on a national morning show where I reluctantly shared more details of my personal story. The segment prompted an outpouring of similar accounts from young people across the country, highlighting how common yet hidden such situations were. As the foundation grew, I invited Sophia to join its community outreach committee, leveraging her firsthand experience from the shelter. Her perspective proved valuable in designing protocols to verify need without adding trauma or shame to already vulnerable students. Her commitment surprised me. She took unpaid leave from her job to dedicate more time to the foundation's work. "I need to do this," she explained when I questioned whether she could afford the reduced income. "Not just for you, but for me. I need to know I'm more than the person who took from you. I need to be someone who gives back." My relationship with my mother evolved more slowly. The cancer treatments left her physically weakened but emotionally present in ways she had never been during my childhood. During a private conversation after a medical appointment I had accompanied her to, she asked a question that revealed how much she had reflected on our past. "When did you first realize I favored Sophia?" she asked quietly as we sat in my car outside the oncology center. I considered the question carefully. "I think I always knew," I finally answered. "But I remember a specific moment when I was 7. You took Sophia shopping for new school clothes, but told me I had to wear her hand-me-downs. When I asked why, you said Sophia needs to make a good impression. The implication being that my impression didn't matter." She closed her eyes, absorbing the memory. "I said so many cruel things without thinking, things I can never take back." "No," I agreed. "You can't take them back. But you're saying different things now." 6 months after our reunion, I hosted a dinner at my home, the first time both my mother and Sophia had visited the house I had purchased with my own success. I prepared my father's favorite meal, a tradition I had maintained privately on his birthday each year. As we sat at my dining room table, the conversation flowed more naturally than it had in our counseling sessions. We weren't pretending to be a normal family. Our history was too complex for that simplification, but we were finding a new way to exist in each other's lives. After dinner, I showed them to my home office where a framed photograph of my father held a place of honor on my desk. Beside it sat a small weathered notebook, his financial ledger where he had tracked his monthly contributions to my college fund for years. I found this in a box of his things Mom gave me after our first counseling session, I explained. He made an entry every month from the day I was born until the month before he died. Never missed once. My mother touched the notebook gently. He was so proud of you, Abigail. He always said you had his mind for numbers but a heart all your own. I wish he could see what you've built, Sophia added. Not just the company, but the foundation. That would have meant everything to him. I nodded, feeling the familiar ache of his absence. I think in some ways, everything I've done has been a conversation with him, trying to live up to what he believed I could be. As they prepared to leave that evening, my mother embraced me carefully, mindful of the physical fragility her treatment had imposed. It was our first genuine hug in 9 years, awkward but sincere. "I'm not the mother you deserved," she whispered, "but I'm trying to be better than the mother I was." It wasn't a dramatic declaration of transformed family bonds, or a Hollywood ending where all wounds were magically healed. It was something more realistic and ultimately more meaningful, an acknowledgement that while the past couldn't be undone, the future remained unwritten. The journey from betrayal to this moment had been long and painful with no shortcuts through the necessary work of confronting truth and rebuilding trust. The $45,000 that had once represented my future had instead become the catalyst for a different path, one that led to greater success than any of us could have imagined, and eventually back to a transformed version of the family I had lost. As I watched them drive away from my home that evening, I realized that the true turning of tables wasn't found in revenge or recrimination. It came in the power to define forgiveness on my own terms, to extend compassion not from weakness but from strength, and to transform my personal pain into purpose through the foundation that would help others avoid the hardships I had endured. My father had taught me about financial investment, but life had taught me about emotional investment, when to cut losses, when to take risks, and how to calculate the true value of relationships. Some lessons can only be learned through hardship, and some strength can only be forged through betrayal. In the end, sleeping in my car at 18 had been the beginning, not the end of my story. Have you ever had to rebuild a relationship after a serious betrayal? What boundaries did you need to set to protect yourself while giving second chances? Share your experiences in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe, and share this video if my story resonated with you. Remember that sometimes our greatest challenges lead to our most meaningful growth. Thank you for listening, and I hope my journey inspires you to turn your own tables when life deals you an unfair hand.